Hello. Can you hear me, Anurag?
Yes, I can hear you, Catherine. Can you hear me?
Yeah, all clear. Yeah.
Can you hear me, Anurag?
Yeah, Umita.
Okay.
Okay, I am connecting as well. Can you hear me? See me?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We're just waiting for one more participant. That is Sumitra.
Yes.
Join in.
Is it part of your screen, Anurag, what we see down?
What is that?
Are you taking a screenshot? Okay, I think, yeah, maybe I can do this.
Yeah, we're just waiting for one more participant.
Okay.
Sumitra. Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's about time that, and we have some people who've already registered onto this webinar, and they are online. So I think we'll allow Sumita to join in as we go along, because
Sure.
I think she's having some technical difficulties at this point in time. But we'll kick off. We'll kick off now.
Okay.
So thank you everyone. Thank you, Umita and Ekta, for being able to take time out for this. We've been discussing this for some days now, and this is a very critical topic. At this point in time, the world has been gripped by this pandemic, COVID, and how we've seen that some of the countries, they have responded, and some of these leaders, like New Zealand, is apparently COVID-free, and there's no lockdown. In fact, every Friday and Saturday there's party happening there. And Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, has been credited with taking all the right steps. But this is not just one of the case. You know, what's happening in Germany, Angela Merkel, in Finland, a very young Prime Minister, Sanna Marin, and in countries like Vietnam and Taiwan. So we see a trend which is happening. I was also going through some of the numbers which are quite alarming. Like it says that 5% of Fortune 500 CEOs are actually women, only 5%.
Yeah.
And 8% of all national leaders across the world, there are women, and only 2% are in the contest for this presidential post. And most surprisingly, 75% of these nominations and postings, they've come about in the last 2 decades. So it's a recent concept that women have been kind of being seen as somebody who can make those strategic decisions, can hold those positions. So that's why we had this panel today. We have this panel today to discuss degendering of society. The equilibrium of society is actually skewed towards one side, and quite heavily. So here we have all of you, women leaders from India and from across, to be able to present a perspective on this. So we'll begin by have a quick round of introduction, maybe Catherine, Umita, and then Ekta, and if Sumita comes in, then she can join. And maybe audience would want to know a bit about yourself.
Sure, Anurag.
All yours.
I'll begin then. Hi everybody. I'm Catherine Munt. Professionally, I've spent most of my career in the publishing industry. In the last 5 years, I moved over to work in the publishing services side, and did work with BPO companies in India who are providing those services. And then last year, I decided it was time to go on my own, and I set up my own company. So I run a learning and development company providing training in digital transformation, outsourcing, and 21st century skills development. And I did this because I believe that opportunity shouldn't have any boundaries. I want my company to offer sustainable training programs and really give opportunity to everybody. I know Anurag from our our international management program, and I'm really flattered to be part of this discussion. I think that when we work with people from other countries and other cultures, it's just such a great opportunity to learn and to share, and forces you to reflect on yourself as well. So thank you, Anurag, for setting this up.
You're most welcome, Catherine. Over to Umita, please.
Good evening, everybody. So my name is Umita Melvani, and I also met Anurag as part of the IPM program and meet people from other cultures and other countries, primarily because the industry that I work in is also a lot to do with people, cultures, languages. So I run an academy for foreign languages, and I've been multicultural, I think, from birth, because my father was born in the Philippines and moved to India when he was 10. And my mother grew up in Spain, where her family still lives. So I kind of grew up with, I think, this advantageous little globalized world that I had as a child. And that's helped me to find my profession. It's not something I studied for. And it's also helped me to maybe look at the world a little differently, from not look at it from one angle, but look at it from different angles. So that's what I really like today about what we're talking about, degendering society, because I think we need to look at the issue, because we have the same issue in the world today, COVID, but how all of us are looking at it from different angles in different countries. And I also do a lot of work with some resident organizations, welfare organizations. I'm part of the TREAT team in my community. And I also have worked with raising a lot of funds for COVID. So I think it'd be interesting for all of us to see how we've all tackled this problem. It's the same kind of an issue, but I think everywhere we've handled it differently. So thanks also, Anurag, again for being on this. I'm really excited to be sharing and hearing from everybody.
You're most welcome. Thank you for taking time out. Yes, Ekta.
I will first of all begin with thanking Anurag for bringing this panel and inviting me, because for me, I think it's an honor to be on a panel among women who have successful careers. They have created a niche for themselves. They have taken the decisions that were right for them in their lives. So I think for me, it's a great inspirational and an honor as well to be part of this panel. So thank you so much, Anurag, for doing this. As you all know, my name is Ekta Uppal. I have worked for over 22 years in different corporate sectors. I started my career, in '97 with a domestic BPO as a customer service executive, and that's where my journey started. Last year, I moved back from Dubai, and I took up another role because that becomes like an obvious choice, right? You come back, you take up the same role. And in 3 months to that, I just knew that this is not for me. Unfortunately, that was also because I was personally affected with the corporate bully. I decided to take on to that and put my foot down, decided to move on. Spent 6 months after that looking for opportunities. And I think, I've probably had enough of rejections, that I thought that, enough is enough. I need to kind of, start looking at what I really want to do. So this year, January, it took a firm decision that yes, of course, for me, the most obvious is, because I'm an artist, is to go full time on that and take my art to the next level. Because for me, art is something that has saved me and has changed me and has taught me so much about life. But apart from that, I also wanted to do something with the 22 years of having spent with people. You know, for me, people are my biggest strength. I live for people, I work for people, and I get my energy from people, right? So I'm a people's person, and I wanted
sorry to interrupt. You used a word, corporate bully, and I will come back to you on that during the conversation.
Yes, I would definitely like to talk a little more on that, because that I feel is one of the biggest reasons why we see less and less numbers of not just women. Yes, of course, there are different type of bullies, but I think in general it is something that has impacted almost every human in some or the other way. So yeah.
I have a question on that. I'll come back to you later. Let's see if Sumita is connected as well, and
yes,
are we able to hear her? Hey, Sumita.
Can't hear you.
Sumita, we can't hear you, so you got to fix the. We can see you, but we can't hear you, so you got to fix the audio there, and we'll then come back to you. While you can you hear us? Just show a thumbs up so that we can. Can you hear us? Can you see us? By a show of hand, just tell us.
No, I don't think so.
Maybe, yeah. So,
can you all hear me?
Yes.
Oh yes.
Yes. Thankfully, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi everyone. I'm really sorry for the technology. You know, technology. I'm always bad with the technology, so I'm really sorry.
I just had the same. No, don't worry. I just had the same issue, but then we managed to fix it, so it happens.
Okay. So hi everyone. I am Sumita Rotila, and thank you very much, Anurag, for actually inviting me for this so-called very important topic actually. So thank you very much for that. About my background, I worked with various organizations. So I started working as an air hostess, and then I actually got into the corporate world, worked with various brands. So got a chance to actually understand and learn the different culture in different organizations, different process, different policies. And Anurag and I actually apparently worked in one of the organizations that I worked in. So both of us were like colleagues. So that's the only reason why I know him very well. With that, as I said, that I was from core operation at a very later stage, like after 10 years, spending 10 to 11 years in operation, I decided to actually move to HR. So currently I'm working with Gartner as an HR director, managing, and this role is actually a global profile wherein not only India, I'm managing the other part of the world as well. So tend to learn a lot in the current organization. So thank you, Anurag, for inviting me.
Well, I'm in the company of women. I can't complain. So kick starting the some of the topics we wanted to discuss tonight is Catherine, as a person who was born and raised in the West and have extensive working experience in India, what similarities and what contrasts do you experience in how it has been for women in the West and in India or in the East per se, in your experience?
Okay, well, thanks for the question, Anurag. So when you sent that question through, I thought to myself, perhaps rather than just anecdotes, it would be good to do a little bit of background research. And so to start in the area of the social context, I think we have to start with employment and women and employment. I'm from the UK, so I focused on the UK rather than the whole of the West. Some latest statistics show that in the UK, the employment rate among women in the prime working age, which I think is like 25 to 54, in 1975, the employment rate of women was 57%, and in 2018, that had gone up to 78%. So that's quite a significant increase, and I think I can speak for women in the UK. You know, we see ourselves as part of the economy. We see, you know, we grow up and think of ourselves largely that we'll go into the workforce, that we will work and be part of the economy. And then in contrast to that, I read in The Economist a report from 2018 that in India, the female employment rate has actually decreased from 35% in 2005 to 26% in 2018. And I was really surprised to read that, because that kind of like doesn't go with my understanding, my ideas, my thinking of what's happening in India. The report said that in India, women are less likely to work than they are in any country in the G20 except for Saudi Arabia. That in this time between 2005 and 2018, the economy has actually more than doubled in India, and the number of working age women has grown by a quarter, so that's 470 million, and yet nearly 10 million fewer women are in jobs. So that really surprised me, and The Economist's view is that this unrealised contribution of women is one of the reasons that India remains poor. So I'm very curious to hear from the colleagues in this round table, you know, your views on that and what you think the reasons are behind that decline. Because as I say, you know, the expectation is, as we see the economy develop in India, we assume that women are going along with it. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that everything's rosy in the UK and perfect for women, but you know, looking at employment, which I think is a really important part of this gender equality, I thought those were very interesting facts to find out. Anurag, do you want us to open up to a bit of discussion with that point?
Yeah, absolutely, because what you said, Catherine, is that India is only next to Saudi Arabia when it comes to how many women are actually engaged in the formal sector of employment. Employable workforce has increased, economy has increased. However, the number of people actually employed has shrunk from 35% to 26%. That's a 9 percentage point decrease, which is a huge, huge ding down on the overall numbers, thereby impacting the economy at a very large scale. So obviously, if you any other panelists have some kind of a perspective on this, I would welcome you to guys, to come in and speak about it in your experience.
Anurag and Catherine, I think you made a great point when you said that, you know, it's a concerning number percentage for us. That why did we see such a big decline, especially in the last couple of years? I think, again, if we probably need to re-look at a lot of factors, because this is not the result of just one segment or one factor, right? Right from the mindset to the policies, to the organization culture, to the colleagues, to the mindset of their, because the culture is defined by the people who work in the organization. So I think we need to start looking at every aspect that affects that, what we are trying to achieve. If we want to encourage women, more and more women to come up to the leadership roles, that means we need to start fixing everything that is hindering that process. So I think, with this, we are starting a dialogue already that what are the differences, where are the challenges as an HR perspective, or from, training, learning and development perspective, or from my perspective as an employee, as a woman, as someone who probably does not have the sort of skills or the educations that, a lot of you probably have. What are the challenges that I faced despite of having the IQ that I have, of in achieving the roles probably I thought I was worthy of. So I think, I'm glad that we are starting this dialogue. Back to you, Anurag. Yeah.
Can I add a little bit more to that then, Anurag? So, that was the UK and looking at India and the number of women in the workplace. And for me, I think that's interesting because I think that being part of the economy and actually earning a salary and having money is power. It gives you access, it gives you choice. It's a leveler. And that's why I started there. Another interesting number that I came across was the World Economic Forum has recently released some figures, and they say this is globally, men versus women. It would take 275 years for women to catch up to the economic level of men. And that equates to $5 trillion of missed opportunity. So, taking it, not just looking at India, beyond India, looking at this globally, we don't have access to the workplace in the same way, and we don't have access to the same kinds of jobs in the same way either. And we have to look at it economically. Perhaps we need to look at it even more so now because of what's happened with COVID and what's happening to the economy. So do we need to think about how getting women into the economy is one way to overcome the challenges that we're going to face. But then just to go back to what I said, I think that if women don't work, we don't have economic power, we're then dependent, we can't necessarily choose for ourselves. You could even say we're not equal, not free.
Enter your address. 92619. Please re-enter your.
Sorry, there was some background noise. I don't know why.
I think Sumita is trying to connect. Yeah, so Sumita was trying to connect. She was trying to dial in with that.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, we are here. So yeah, Catherine, you raised some very, very pertinent and critical questions. I would like to bring Omita into the picture because she is somebody who's been self-employed for a long time, and she also works with these women groups. I believe from the marginal strata of the society. So, Sumita, what's your perspective on what Catherine has said? Omita.
So, hi. So to answer that question, so
Sorry, Sumita. I said Omita. So there's been a, we like having a poem, rhyming names. So.
I think so. There's a confusion. I mean, like Omita.
Yeah. Sorry, Sumita. Please go on, Omita.
Yeah. So, Catherine, I think one of the points that you made about India relates to a lot of women working in what we call very loosely the unorganized sector in India. So a lot of women work as domestic help. They work in, like in construction sites. So the kind of jobs that don't really get recognized as jobs. So when you are looking at whether they are economically empowered or whether they are looked as employed, so there are no records on it, so nobody really knows how many women work like this, but a lot of women do work like that. And therefore, they don't get counted as economic contributors. So having said that, like Anurag said, I work with a lot of women. And especially in the COVID, for instance, we've seen there are a lot of women whom we call in India, and especially in Karnataka, they're called Paura Kramikas. So basically these women who sweep the streets. Yeah. Their work is to sweep the streets. Of course, they come into maybe what is called as the organized sector because they work for the government. But a lot of them don't really, let's say they don't really have much education, and people don't recognize the jobs that they do. Even though in our country, I think a lot of these women have actually kept our country, have kept the wheels of our country going, because, when our Prime Minister announced this midnight lockdown and transport was stopped, these women have actually turned up for work the very next day, walking 2 hours to get where they are, to clean and sweep our streets and keep our country moving, because everybody, if nobody picked our garbage, if nobody cleaned our streets, and how would we actually talk about all the sanitation and everything that we're talking about? So I think a lot of women who work in those kind of roles, I feel, don't get the kind of requirement, don't get the kind of recognition that they should in our country. They are mostly ignored or looked over because obviously they're not in corporate jobs. But they actually form, I feel, a very, very important segment of our country that we should look at with different eyes today. And I think that's important, because in this COVID crisis, there are a lot of women who have lost jobs and who are going to lose jobs. One sector where a lot of women have lost jobs is education. A lot of primary schools have shut down in our country, especially pre-primary schools. So these so-called daycare centers and play schools have shut down, and most of the people who work there are women. So all these women are definitely going to lose their jobs. Also, other women will lose jobs because we are still looking at children studying from home, because education currently in India is still online, which means a lot of women will not be able to really put their focus on their work, because they have to sit at home, they have to supervise their kids, because the schools expect that parents, especially then it falls onto the mother to supervise their child. And unlike Germany, for instance, Germany and the Netherlands, the first thing that they opened on the 4th of May was pre-primary school, so that women could go back to work. But in India, we haven't unfortunately done that. So that means more people will lose their jobs. So as you are pointing out, in this strange situation where we have women who work who are not recognized, and yes, we are now going to have a lot of women who work in the recognized sectors who are going to lose their jobs.
Yeah. And that point about the, I'll just say, with COVID in the UK, the women have needed to take that responsibility of doing the homeschooling and looking after the older members of the family, and children are still not back at school in the UK, and children won't be going back to school until September. And so, those risks that you're mentioning regarding women in employment, that's happening in the UK as well. That's not just in India. That's in part of the Western world as well. As I say, it's not rosy over here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think Germany and Netherlands did a sensible thing of opening schools, because that really helped people to get their lives back. And also, I think in a way, it's probably going to lead to less domestic violence, because a lot of domestic abuse because of children and women, because everybody is cooped up in the same place, and women have to take so much responsibility at this time. It's really not easy for everybody to execute that.
Yeah.
And Umita, have you seen any kind of a state-sponsored support for these groups so far, or none at all?
To be very frank, Anurag, I don't think in our country, especially for these women who really need it, and I'm talking about, women who work as our domestic help, women who work as cooks, and women who do these small jobs, there isn't really much help. And during this COVID crisis, I mean, the government has given out food, as in, they've given what is the ration, as in rice and dal, and they have given out to the women itself. But I mean, can you hear me now? I think I just went off for a minute.
Yeah.
So the government has given food grains, and they've given some help, like 500 rupees a month. I'm not really sure how effective that is, and I'm not really sure how many women have got it, because we interacted with a lot of women who have not got it, though some women have got it. But I think, like in a place like Bangalore, for instance, women have been lucky because a lot of NGOs have worked with them. We've ensured that everybody's got food. We've given out things like sanitary pads. We've given out soaps. So they have been helped. But it's very difficult for me to talk about maybe the more rural areas and bigger states like Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. I think there will be a lot of struggle in those places.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think then we can use this forum to kind of drive this point that it then falls upon the privileged section of the society to work hand in hand with these marginalized people, so that we are able to create a more plural kind of an existence. And you're absolutely right in the points that you make, Umita. Now, I quickly want to move away from our socialist discourse to the people who've actually been part of these cutthroat corporates, let's call it, and what has been some of their experience, and where Ekta and Sumita are a part of that. So Ekta, I understand that you've worked extensively assisting CXO level people, and then after 20 or more than 2 decades, you've now switched over to being a life coach and being an independent professional. You're an artist. So what prompted this move for you?
Okay, so just an alert, I will try and stay as concise as possible. But to be able to give you, to be able to get relevance to where I am today, I think probably I'll give you a little background of my journey. So I grew up in a Punjabi family, business class family, very orthodox, very not conservative. I was fortunate to have a very liberal father and an educated mother. So they believed that, education is must for us. They educated us in every, in their capacity, whatever, right? So right after 12th, due to certain conditions, I had to start working. I started working in a domestic BPO. Now, my first challenge, I think, was surpassing the fact that I am not a graduate, right? I'm just a 12th pass. That was my first barrier. I think the education became my very first barrier. My second barrier was that because I studied in a Hindi medium school, I did not know how to converse well in English, right? Because it was not my first language. My first language was always Hindi, whether in school or in, at home. So those that started becoming my barrier. I fought my way through, to be very honest. I think it's been a very, very interesting journey for me, because 22 years I've worked on so many different roles, so many different industries. I have worked with pretty much, I think, all the industries except aviation that is left that I have not worked with, right? After having worked for 22 years, I realized that, at this point, I am 40. Do I really want to start convincing people about my caliber once again? My experience, right? I have worked extensively with great corporates, right? I can name the organizations, and people really look forward to working with those, organizations. I have been fortunate, probably that those opportunities were presented to me, but also probably I fought my way through. I convinced them that yes, despite of the lack of the education that you think that I have, I still have the skills, I still have the IQ that is really desired to do the job. So I think, after having to struggle again after 22 years, saying that, am I capable or not depends on that degree that is there on my CV. So I think that was the big moment for me where I realized that, it is time that I need to do something different. Yes, obviously, it was an obvious choice for myself to invest in my art because that's my passion. And that's something, like I said, that, has saved me. But I did not want this 22 years also to go waste. I knew I wanted to do something, but what, how? Because it has to have an impact. If I'm not going to if I will not be able to use my 22 years of experience, it will not be, significant. So last year I decided that, okay, let me start exploring the life coach arena. And the more and more researched, I think I am definitely detaching myself from the term life coach. because I am no one to coach someone on how to live their life. We all know it. We all know how to live our lives, right? You don't need coaches. All we need is someone to listen and to do the hand holding and to sell you to kind of trigger that in your life, right? That you start taking charge of your own life. So I thought that I will call myself happiness coach, because the core of every single problem is that when we are not happy, whether you talk about nepotism, corona, pandemic, everything that is happening, is the core issue is that we as humans have stopped being happy. So for my idea now is to inspire women, not just women. I think, I'm a very gender neutral person. So I have never been pro-feminist all the time talking about women rights. And I am also not, anti-men. So for me, I think on a human level, we need to start looking at where we have created these mindset that has stopped women from achieving what they want to achieve. How do we begin to break the patterns that we all have been constantly part of, whether it is political, whether it is economical, whether it is socio-economic, in every aspect. I think it is time that we need to start looking at life, because unless we have done the conditioning of our boys, of our men, doing anything for women, presenting any opportunities for women will not, probably bring the results that we need to. So I think the change has to happen on more on human level than just on a gender level.
Right. See, before I get too emotional, because that's a really moving story you've shared, and it could be the story of a lot of people who are listening to this conversation right now. Somebody fighting their way up and not giving up, right? So that's pretty much But let me tell you, you don't look 40, okay?
Oh, yeah, right.
You're not looking 40 at all. So you've done a good job with that.
41. Let's just say I'm 41. I've touched.
Yeah. Now, I will come back to the point of the corporate bully, because I don't know who that is, and you have to share that. Maybe that bully is listening into this conversation today. I don't know.
I am certainly sure not, but somebody from the group might. So
Yeah. Then I want to have this question asked to Sumita, who's actually making a lot of strategic decisions on employees as the HR director. So Sumita, in your opinion, do you see that a lot of policy making and these decision making which happening in these HR rooms are actually taking gender diversity into account or not consciously?
Am I audible?
Yes.
Hear me?
Yeah, go on.
You can, right?
We can hear you loud and clear.
All right. So to promote the gender diversity, so there are a lot of programs and policies which, as an HR, we actually create. We always think that how can we actually empower female employees, because we have seen in the organization that technically, the right way of saying that in HR, you will see a lot of female employees are working. Vis-a-vis, if you see in operation business side, you will see a lot of male employees like working, and at one stage of time, even the female who are like part of operations, at one stage, like when they are manager or senior manager, after that they get married, and then they don't want to be at that level, they want to move to a different department. So to promote all these things, that there are various programs which we actually run for the female employees, so that they become a part of that particular organization, specifically that the vertical, which is more important. So there are a lot of policies, procedures and guidelines, and that's not only limited to female employees. We actually do the same thing for our male employees also. Like so there was a lot of, I can give an instance that once there were like a lot of male employees, they were saying that female can go on maternity leave for like good 6 months, because that's a law now, etc. And in India, a lot of organizations who give only 3 days of paternity leave, or max to max 5. So we as an HR, we thought that, why not give paternity leave to the male employees as well. So we can't afford to give them 6 months of leaves, but we decided to actually give them, 15 days of leave, so that, they can actually give a lot of time to their newborn kid, to their wife, because, during this time, in India as well, and a lot of other places as well, a lot of people who are staying as a nuclear family, so they don't get family support. And that's the only thought which came in our mind, of thinking of giving, paternity, increasing the paternity leave. But, to answer your question, we as an HR, we always intend, and our objective is to actually create policy which are, specifically, for diversity. We create policies which are helpful for all the people, which are more friendly to them, and people go ahead and accept that policies. So, this is what I need to say on that.
But I also want to ask you, as a follow-up question, Sumita, why is there a need to do this? Why do we need more women into the workplace, in the corporates? Has there been any discussion on that, or is it just a decision which has been thrust upon people and they're just following it?
See, so again, you need to, if you go, I can go back to what Catherine said, that, in India, there are a lot of people, female, you don't see a lot of female employees working. Still in Metro City, you see a lot of female, the ratio is not that high. And that's the only reason why we always promote, like, as I said, that, in business, you don't see female employees. There is not an equal balance. And being in HR, you have to, the aspiration is to actually keep a balance of 50-50, which is technically not possible in, and we face a lot of challenge, but we want female employees to be a part of that, because, that equal balance is very important, because we don't want people to be biased, and we do see that. Coming back to, Ekta, a lot of females are being bullied by their male bosses, right? That, they go on a smoke break and they don't interact with the female employees. But yes, to actually change for a good culture, it is very important to have a good mix. And that's the only reason why we create policies, so that female feel empowered, protected, and get a lot of support from, from the leadership team.
Yeah. Now, thanks, Samita. Sorry, Anurag, I'm going to just take a very quick moment in probably just adding up to what Samita was saying, that in terms of corporate bully. So trust me, the bully doesn't happen just by the men. I think women are equally part of the bully that happens on a much larger scale for various reasons, right? Again, it's very individual. But when it comes to the policies, I think what needs to change is the concept that these systems are created for people by people, which means they need to have that sort of agility which can change over a period of time. I think the biggest challenge that we face specifically as India, and I will speak definitely for India because I worked in the UAE for 6 years and I see the kind of policies and the mindset that individuals have there, because obviously it's a different mix. But I think specifically as India, what we are where we are stuck is the mindset, right? And whether it is the mindset about a woman or a man, or about stereotyping, or about the education, that there are so much, right? We need to start breaking those mindsets when it comes to policies, right?
Yeah, well, taking a cue from the mind. Sorry, Catherine, you want to say something?
I did actually. If I can just give a little anecdote about which for me is very, very inspiring. I do some work at the moment with a company based in Tanjore in the south of India, and they have about 250 people, and 97% of the workforce is women. And the CEO made a conscious decision to employ women because of the social benefits that there are, in terms of he's set up this business, it's his second business, and he set up the business. It's very philanthropic, and he set it up because he wants development in his local town. And he's lived out of India, and he's come back and has decided that if women can get out of the home and get to the office and start working and have the benefits of, oh, can everybody still hear me?
What did we get?
Are we doing a poll now, Anurag?
Yes, suddenly
Oh,
it's something.
Oh yeah.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Anurag.
Anyway, I'll just finish on this anecdote. But he decided to employ women. So 97% of the workforce of 250 employees are women, and I've spoken to them, and they tell me that to get out of the home and to get into society and to have that economic power, that economic purchasing power, but really importantly, and the women have told me this, they are seen now as social agents. They are decision makers, and the younger generation are getting a different kind of experience and a different, yes, it's breaking the stereotypes that their parents grew up with. And I find it really, really inspiring that somebody is doing this and has been able to do it as well.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Catherine. Now, taking a cue from that, I had read that men, when they are trying to find their identities and distinction, they do it via separation. They want to stand out and do things and be seen as somebody who's not part of the crowd. However, as far as women are concerned, they are drawing their distinction through collaboration and inclusivity. And when I think of the response across the world to this COVID-19 situation, based on the countries who've done well and based on the countries who are still struggling, do you see this trait being played out there? Any of you? It's open for.
Well, I think Anurag, this question also has to do a lot with the probably the personality of the person itself. It not necessarily male or female, but I think it's probably got to do with the personality of the person itself. Because, for instance, if you take two examples, if you take Donald Trump and Angela Merkel. So Angela Merkel is been traditionally always been labeled as the boring leader. She's not a woman given to theatrics. She's a scientist. And even when she took the decision on the COVID crisis, she listened to all her advisors. She took advice from them, and she appointed committees, and she allowed them to take the decisions. Whereas if you take somebody like Donald Trump, because he likes to be at the center of stage, so maybe it's part of his personality, and he wanted to be seen as taking all the decisions. And if the decision went bad, then he wanted to blame somebody else. And if
Hello? Sorry.
Umita, your audio just. Oh, no, we've lost connectivity. We've lost connectivity with Umita.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll allow her to come back. Until then, there's a lot of people, a lot of women listening into this conversation today.
Yeah.
So, if there was one piece of advice each one of you were to give them, what would it be?
I
Just
think, can I go first?
one. Yeah, sure. Go on.
My biggest piece of advice to any woman or any man, even man, like I said, that I try to stay as gender neutral as possible, will be that continue believing in your risk-taking abilities. I think that is something which is very, very important for all of us to inculcate in our youth, in our people, in everyone around, that until unless you have that sort of risk-taking ability, you will not be able to make the decisions that you should. Yes, you may mess up sometime. Yes, you will make mistakes. Yes, everything will happen. So I personally feel that if these leaders have done something right, is that they have believed in their risk-taking abilities, because when they announced lockdown, they were taking a risk. Every decision they took, there was a certain amount of risk involved. They believed in that. Yes, they took calculated risk, right? Once you start believing in the risk, your own ability, you start taking more calculated risks. So my piece of advice will be sure of taking risk.
And I think so, 2 cents from my side would be never lose your individuality, because, you know, in a corporate world, I mean, I have seen in a corporate world, just to make somebody feel happy, you are trying to lose your individuality and you are just trying to become like someone. You don't have to become like someone. You just have to be yourself, trust your instincts, trust your ability, trust your skills. And I think so there's a long way to go, and people will accept you the way you are. So you don't have to become like anyone. Just don't think of, you know, don't lose your individuality. That's 2 cents from my side.
Thank you.
I think to add to Ekta's point about the taking risks, and I think the leaders that we have seen who haven't taken risks are the cowards. They're the ones that have either hidden behind the science when it's been convenient, and then thrown water over the science when that's been convenient, and they haven't taken calculated risks and they haven't looked for information. And I think just one thing, looking at those kinds of leaders, that we have some misogyny in leadership at the moment. If I think about, for example, Donald Trump and some other world leaders that really looked down on and mocked Greta Thunberg when it was announced that she was going to be Time magazine's Person of the Year in 2019, and all they could do was make fun of her. And so I think we have to be careful at the moment, because there is misogyny in some of these global leaders, and as women, what does that mean? And for us to just be careful with that, because we know that not everybody, but people look to the leaders and people do follow their behaviours. Donald Trump doesn't wear a mask, so the US is not going to wear a mask in time of COVID. So it's just that being careful and mindful of the kind of some of the leaders that we've got.
Thanks for that. So Umita, welcome back. You just lost connectivity with you for a while. What we were talking is that there are many women listening into this conversation, and if there was one piece of advice you would want to share with them, what would it be today?
Well, I don't think this advice is just for women, but for everybody. Like Ekta said, I think we all have to find what makes us happy on our journey. And that is the key to everything. Because if you're happy and you're content in your journey, I think that's the biggest key to everything, to your personal space, to your professional space, to the way you view yourself. I think everything depends on how you view on keeping yourself happy.
So if I were to summarize that, there's no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. Would that be correct?
Yes. Because it's part of the journey, and everything changes because perspectives change. And I don't think we should think that when we were 20 we might have thought that this would be our dream job, and at 40 if we are not there and we have to be unhappy. I don't think so. Like Ekta, I have to tell you, like we were talking about English. Yes, a lot of women who don't speak very good English don't get the corporate jobs. That's unfortunate. I meet a lot of them who come to me, and we are teaching. And so that's again, because people want to just, but that happens to men as well. So if men don't speak good English, so people want to slot you into places. And I think when you look at yourself and you're able to accept the change, and you're willing to be happy through any moment, it's not easy, but you have to keep trying. So I think happiness is the biggest skill that you have to work on, and you have to be mindful of it, and you have to be content. Because if you're not content, then whatever you have is never going to make you happy, and therefore you're never going to view yourself as successful or not successful, because everything just depends on how you view things.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this is a very, very particular question I wanted to put up to this panel today. is that there are parents listening into this conversation who are raising kids, female kids. So what would you tell them that what should be their mindset when they are actually raising a female kid in the context of, say, an Indian society or a developing society or an underdeveloped society? You know, a nation, not society, but a nation for that matter. So the kind of mindset a parent should have when they are raising a girl child.
So I probably can say that. I think so. I don't say that it's a piece of advice to all the parents, but I think so. There should not be difference between a girl child and a boy child. For parents, it's just their child. It doesn't matter whether it's a girl or a boy. I think so. The treatment should be equal. Like, for example, we are four in like, I have three more siblings, so we are two boys and two girls in our house. So I've been very fortunate that my parents never made that difference, that boys, these are the things for boys and these are the things for the girls. But the place which I come from, where I come from, like I come from Uttarakhand. I mean, like, that's a hilly area. People are very orthodox. Specifically, parents are very orthodox there, so they are not allowed to go to the school. When they clear their 12th standard, they normally get married. I have never seen those pressures on me from my parents. And I feel that parents should be, now I don't say that it was like 10 years ago the situations were different, but now the situation, even parents are evolving, everything is evolving. So there should not be any difference between a girl child and a boy child. For parents, it's like only a child. It doesn't matter. You should be giving them the education what they want, give them the right piece of advice, etc., etc.
Right. Anybody else want to add anything?
I have two daughters. One is 23 and the other one is 21, or they're going to be 21 and 23. I think all along,
Yeah.
my husband and I, we have looked at them as human beings. It's
Yeah.
not just girls, they're just human beings, and they have certain interests which we want to foster. We definitely want our children to be independent financially, emotionally, mentally, because that's important to you as a human being. And I think sometimes, Anurag, when we slot things into developing, developed, underdeveloped, I think those are very different, difficult tags to put on either cultures or to put on nations. Because if you take India, our ancient culture had so many sages, had so many women rulers. If you look at the Upanishads, which are just basically books of knowledge and logic, there is no distinction between men and women.
Yeah.
There's no distinction. They just look at you as a person. So I think we have somehow lost that connect. So I don't think we can slot countries into developing and developed. I think we should look into countries which are they logical or not logical in their approach. And we should move to a more logical approach when we define our culture, when we define the stage of development that we are in. I think that is more appropriate than looking at it only from point of view of men, women, developed, underdeveloped. I would probably be more partial to that kind of a definition.
Yeah, well said, Umita. Anybody else?
Yeah, thanks, Sumita, for mentioning the happiness being the core of everything that we do. And the same thing that we need to do is while we're raising our kids. We need to start telling them the key to happiness is not the amount of success or the amount of money you make, but internally, how successful do you feel? How content do you feel? So one very, I think, crucial thing that we all need to inculcate in our kids, right? Again, not just a boy or a girl, because that's the whole concept that we need to degender the entire society. So this message, probably this piece of advice is for everyone. Whatever you do, make sure that you release your child from any fear of failure. because that is the root of every other fear that they will probably ever face. Because if they are afraid to fail at something, they're not going to try something. So you need to allow them to be vulnerable. You need to allow them to make mistakes. You need to allow them to learn from their own experiences. Because what I think the biggest trend, and probably that's one of the reasons why we have lesser and lesser women, that we have because of whatever is happening, we have become overprotective about our girls or about daughters or about women, right, in general, because we think it's a bad world outside. So unfortunately, that's the conditioning parents are giving, because we are inculcating only and only fear, whether in a kid, in a boy or a girl. So I think, yeah, we need to be more be with them and understand where their fears are sprouting from.
Just one last point, Anurag, if I can add then. I don't have children, and so I did a bit of research and did a bit of reading for this question, Anurag. And it got me thinking about education. And I read that globally, girls are not encouraged to study STEM, computer science. In fact, at the moment, of the computer science jobs in the world, 3% are held by women. And yet, coding is the language of the future. Technology, a lot of the jobs in the future are in technology. And so for, these are some of the social constructs that we have to tackle, and they're part of our mindsets. But, how much do we encourage boys to go into those areas, but not girls? What kinds of language is used? And the report I was reading was saying that, words like boring or difficult are presented to girls when it's things like science, technology. And I think this is a really, really important point, tying up to what I was saying at the beginning about employment and the world of work, and being part of the economy. And so for parents, Anurag, to be mindful of this.
Yeah, absolutely. See, sorry, I was saying that by no means I want this discourse to be turning into a male bashing discourse, because as we were going on, I was getting some messages, that we're getting heavily skewed towards one side of the gender. So yeah. This is just the part one. We are doing a series basically, and we're talking to women about the issues of women. However, I personally feel that the change is never going to happen if men are not going to talking about the issues of women, and they're going to own these issues. So in the next series, we're going to be having men from different walks of society, corporate, social strata. The only point we're trying to make here is that the really important decisions in our lives, like of raising a family, building a home, imparting culture, we leave that to the women of the house. So why is it that we are not trusting them enough in our boardrooms, in our politics, in our society at a large scale? And the point is not to have that half and half or a 50-50, because that's not going to happen, as Sumita said earlier. But there has to be a pursuit, and there has to be an effort that everybody is presented with a fair opportunity of evaluation, be it a man or a woman or a male child or a girl child. So that's the pursuit basically of this. So before we finish here, I want each one of you to directly talk to the men out there who are listening, and have a piece of advice or a little chat, or if you want to scold them, be my guest. Go ahead. Have a line or two for them, so that when we're doing the next part, we have a premise or a starting point.
I think probably I will begin on that. Sorry, Amita, if in case you will begin to talk. I just thought that I will. I just have men, dear men. you are equally women. Let's just say that as an individual, once you start looking at yourself just as a human, you will realize that the same emotions, same feelings that you have stored inside yourself. So just because a woman is strong does not make her manly, and just because a man is more sensitive does not make her womanly. So I think we need to start breaking those stereotypes, start accepting stronger women in your circle around you, and having a voice of them without really finding the need to label them. And this again, please do not take it personally. I'm not talking to just the specific men present on this platform, but I think in general, we need to start breaking those stereotypes around women and around men as well.
Yeah, and if you've not understood what she said, you got to watch the movie The White Chick. Maybe that would be.
Oh gosh.
Anyway, who's next?
Well, I'll go next. So there are these pair of stars, you know, and we call them the Arundhati and Vashishta pair of stars. So they basically are these two stars which are circling each other, but they're not like one star is in the middle and the other star is going around. They both are in a balance, moving together. So one moves like this, the other moves like that. So I think the learning that we have from that in our ancient wisdom is that men and women have their own role. And depending on how the need is, the role will change. So there's no thing to say that one person is more important than the other. It means to say that both are required and both will move as is the requirement in the relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think I'd like to just pick up again on the word equality, and I would say to the gentleman on this webinar, listening to this webinar, think about equality and ask yourself, equality on whose terms? Because if equality comes at a price, because it's on somebody else's terms, that's not equality.
Yeah, well said, Catherine. We just are left with a visual of Sumita. Maybe we can take that as a message, but that looks like an aggressive message to men.
Absolutely not. I think so. You know, trust is something. You know, trust females. I would say that, you know, trust is more important. I mean, like for me, it's very important because I think so. The trust is something missing. Like, you know, you need to trust the female that their decisions are going to be fine. You will be fine, you know, when you are with the company of females. So trust is something, and then obviously quality is something which we all look for. So I'm not saying that, you know, guys are not doing a job over a course of, like, you know, from last 10 years. If I see myself and people around me, specifically the males, including my parents, my siblings, etc. So they have improved a lot. There's a lot of huge shift. But now I still feel that, you know, a little bit is missing. So continue doing the good job. So trust is something which I request you guys to trust your mothers, your girlfriends, your friends, your sisters, etc. That's it.
Yeah, and trust your wives too.
Trust your wives too. That's right.
You're saying trust your wives, and you all have only one wife.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you, ladies. You know, it was a really engaging, humorous, interesting session, and this is just one part of it. Next time we'll have men who will be coming over and talking about these, and maybe we will have a joint session after that to be able to have a more meaningful kind of discussion, and hope this discussion then pours out off our screens into homes, into companies, into boardrooms, into politics, into policy making. We can only wish for. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Anurag.
Thank you, Anurag.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
you, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.